Two more potential future 49ers scouting reports for edge rusher Chop Robinson, cornerback Nate Wiggins. How do they fit? Do they fit for the San Francisco 49ers? And will they be there at pick 31? Coming at you right now.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Crocky209. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We love all the everydayers out there, and we love it when you subscribe on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. This episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first ticket purchase. All right, Croc, this was a fun one. I had fun watching Chop Robinson and Nate Wiggins for these scouting reports as we try to stack our Locked On 49ers big board, getting ready for April, getting ready for the 2024 NFL draft, and a couple of good ones here, a couple of guys that really showed out at the combine, a couple of players that we have seen in mock drafts at pick 31 to the San Francisco 49ers. Did they work out too good at the combine to be around for the 49ers at 31? Let's get into it and start with the edge rusher, Croc, in Chop Robinson. And he's an undersized but extremely athletic edge rusher. You know the prototype. Sometimes people look at this type of player and think, okay, this is a fit for a 3-4 defense, right? The outside stand-up linebacker. But I saw a little bit more than that in Chop Robinson. And in fact, Croc, I was a little bit surprised at what I saw when I was watching Chop Robinson. I can't wait to hear what you have to say about it. But Chop Robinson, Damian is his real first name, but he goes by Chop. We're just going to call him Chop because I don't even know if I'm pronouncing his God-given first name correctly. Penn State edge rusher, 6'2" and 7/8", so just a hair under 6'3", 254 pounds. Threw down a 4.48 40-yard dash at that size, Croc. And my one phrase scouting report for Chop Robinson: GTFO. Get the bleep off, right? First step quickness. You got to have get off if you're going to be on Chris Kosurik's defensive line, and Chop Robinson has an elite amount of it.
Really good get off. I thought he had really good bend as well. So when you kind of pair that explosiveness with that bend coming around the edge, I thought that was something that showed up a considerably amount of times. You know, one of my folks on Twitter, because I had tweeted out this one clip where he gets around the corner and he just blasts JJ McCarthy from Michigan. And I was like, I don't know what this right tackle is doing here. I think he looked like his controller died and he kind of just stood there and Chop got around the corner. But you were able to see just kind of that explosiveness, that bend, and it just boom, that length, and he explodes into, obviously knocking down the quarterback, JJ McCarthy. But I'm not going to lie. I felt it hard outside of that Michigan game where the right tackle was just atrocious. It was hard to find a lot of wins in a consistent way. Now, the last time I really watched a lot of defensive line prospects, it was the Nick Bosa draft. So I'm watching Nick Bosa. I'm watching Brian Burns. I'm watching Cleveland Farrell, right? I'm watching Josh Allen. There were a bunch of guys, and I even watched the defensive tackle from Alabama went to the Jets. Blanking on his name right now.
Quinnen Williams.
Yeah. All right. So I'm watching all these guys, and you just see how they win. You'll see a lot of times they win, impact, just making plays or just barely missing the quarterback, getting right there. And I did not see that from Chop. It was hard to find areas where he's going to win this way consistently outside of utilizing his speed to beat the tackle off the edge. Like I saw one time a bull rush, where I was just, okay, there goes a little bit of speed to power. Like, cool. Like, I want to see that. But just in the sense of outside of the Michigan game, like if you want to love him, watch the Michigan game. But outside of that game, there wasn't a whole lot of consistent wins. But if you go back to, and again, maybe it's unfair to compare him to Nick Bosa, Brian Burns, Josh Allen, those guys. But if you watched how consistently they were able to win at the collegiate level in different ways of doing it. Brian Burns, I'm watching him beat guys off the edge, spin moves, speed to power. I'd see him have that one arm stab where he's pushing the quarterback or pushing the tackle into the quarterback's lap. Just all these different ways. And with Chop, I could see that burst off the edge, but every time it looks like he's trying to run the hoop. And then I haven't even got on the run defense from him. It took me 3 games to watch him even get a tackle like that was any significance on a running back in a game. So I have more notes on this too, with how he was. But I think more people are going to be impressed by what he did at the scouting combine. And then maybe if you watch a highlight of him, I can only imagine. Again, I don't watch highlights because I feel like it just starts to kind of take my mind, and I'll start to look at like the best version of what he potentially could be. But I want to see if he is consistently, on film. And it was hard to find the wins.
Even in that Michigan game, which I also watched, Croc, he didn't get any sacks in that game. But and I saw a lot of what you saw. And I think there's context needed here, because I think Chop Robinson is a prospect who's going to be a better pro statistically than he was a college football player. He only had, but that's one of the big negatives with him. He's only had 11 and a half career sacks in 3 years. Now, he started at Maryland, and he's more of an off-ball linebacker, then transferred to Penn State, where he was an edge rusher. But 7.5 sacks last year, 11.5 career sacks for Chop Robinson. With his athleticism, his ability to run the arc, you would think he would get a lot more sacks and have a lot more production, because the tackle numbers are not high. He had 4 sacks last year, 11.5 for his career. He only had 7.5 tackles for loss and 15 total tackles on the season, Croc. So, like, statistically, it's not there.
And I didn't look at the stats either. So but that aligns kind of with what I saw. You watched 4 games, and oh man, maybe if he didn't have a sack in those games, you didn't see much productivity outside of not even having a sack. Like with Nick Bosa, you'd see him just set the edge, blow up the play, make a tackle in the backfield. With Josh Allen, you just saw him. I mean, it felt like he had sacks every single game, and you just saw the impact. And then they'd have to double team him, or he beat guys with speed. Like you just saw these other Brian Burns. I watched him one play on the goal line take away the read option from he made the quarterback keep it because he was taking away the run, and then the quarterback tried to take off, and then he tackled him too. Like he took away 2 guys in one play. So again, I'm talking about guys that were all taken in the top 20. Chop is being someone that they're talking about potentially going to the 49ers at 31. So again, clearly they're telling me as well, like, Croc, he's not the same caliber prospect as these other guys you're talking about. So I guess that's 49er fans who potentially want that edge. It will be harder to get that guy if you're picking this late in the round.
And it's fair, though, to compare him to, like, Brian Burns went, 17? I've seen Chop Robinson in the late teens. I've seen him in the early 20s. He's not that far off. So what are we talking about as a prospect? I think there's some good reasons why, though, Croc, that statistically he didn't have a big career in college, and some things I loved about his tape, which is why I think he's going to be much better statistically in the NFL than he was at Penn State. More positives than negatives for Chop Robinson, where I think he's going to go the grade there. And of course, cornerback Nate Wiggins out of Clemson, who blazed in the 40-yard dash at the combine as well. We'll finish it up next. This episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience. What brings home the Lombardi Trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. We're talking superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and tons more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered with over 122 million parts for your ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that W. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. This episode is also brought to you by Game Time. And when you're buying tickets to your next big event, you shouldn't have to worry about it. It shouldn't be a hassle to buy tickets to that event. And Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all of the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. We're talking killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, view from your seat, and the best price guarantee makes Game Time the best way to buy tickets and takes all the guesswork out of buying tickets and takes away all the hassle you might feel, and especially those all-in prices, which I love because you see your total up front. You don't get hit with, you think your tickets are one price, you go to check out, you're like, wait a second, what the heck am I doing here? I thought I had this price. All-in prices show your total up front at Game Time, so you know you're getting a great deal before you check out. And I really utilized Game Time watching baseball games last season. I wish I knew about Game Time longer, and I can't wait for the Major League Baseball season to start. I can pop into the city, get some Giants tickets last minute if I want, even up to an hour after the game starts, and I'm rolling to the ball game with a great deal. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, Croc, Chop Robinson. And when it comes to Chop, here's the strengths I had listed in order. First of all, Chop's an explosive athlete. We talked about his elite get-off. He's got closing speed. We talked about how he can run the arc. He's competitive as well with an active motor, which I really liked. And I really came away thinking he would benefit a ton from being in an NFL system and being in the 49ers system specifically, that wide 9 alignment, because I was surprised, Croc, at 254 pounds, Chop Robinson was pretty stout setting the edge for his size. And a lot of times he wasn't either not allowed to or didn't have just a free reign to go pass rush how he wanted to. It seemed like to me, and I don't know what the defensive meetings are at Penn State. But I was surprised sometimes where he was almost playing like a 5-tech, and there was a guy coming on the outside of him, pass rushing. And that's the thing that stood out to me at 254 pounds, Croc, was how competitive he was, how active he was, and how strong he was at the point of attack, and even able to push guys, offensive tackles, backward that were, weighing 60 more pounds than he does. So I thought that was phenomenal. But I don't know how you only have an 11.5 career sacks when you could run the arc like Chop Robinson can. And I think he could benefit from, again, scheme in the NFL, being allowed to rush from the outside, have better pass rush plans, stunts and those types of things. But he needs more counter moves because it looks like a lot of times Chop has a really good plan for what he's going to do initially. But if an offensive lineman gets their hands on him, it ends and he doesn't have a lot else there. And he's just kind of fighting with them. And it's a stalemate from that point. And he does have a little bit shorter arms, which might be part of why he can get locked up sometimes by bigger offensive tackles. 32.5-inch arm length, which is not ideal for an edge rusher. You prefer to have those longer arms, 33, 34 plus even. But you wouldn't expect it at his height, just under 6'3", to have super long arms. He loses sight of the ball, Croc, which is why I think he sometimes doesn't get a lot of tackles. And he's so intent on the battle he has in front of him that I think he loses sight of the ball, and he's battling here and not going and chasing down the ball carrier. So, but with his explosive ability and some of his immediate wins, even though they didn't result in sacks a lot of times, because this is what happens, this is kind of why I hate college football, Croc, because they get rid of the ball so stinking fast. Everything's just like whoop, whoop, screen. He'll beat a guy as fast as you can possibly beat a guy, and still there's no sack to be had because the quarterbacks get rid of the ball so fast in a lot of these spread systems, which is a big note on why I loved watching Nate Wiggins and some of the games that Clemson played. And it made it a lot easier to scout Nate Wiggins when you're playing against a team that's making NFL throws, NFL dropbacks, and you're playing man coverage versus some of the goofy stuff that happens on the college level. So I love Chop Robinson. I would have no problem taking him at 31. I don't think he's going to be there, Croc, at pick 31. And I think he would be huge for the 49ers in that wide 9 scheme. And the thing I was most impressed about, I think his sack numbers will go up in the NFL. The thing I was most impressed about, and he does have some work to do, a little bit raw with his, his counter moves and maybe using his hands a little bit better to disengage from blocks. I was really impressed at 254 pounds, how good he was setting the edge. He's a physical guy, and he does have a motor.
I definitely saw sometimes he set the edge. I thought more times than not, though, I felt like offensive linemen moved him where they wanted him to go. And that might be kind of with what you were saying with maybe him losing sight of something, right? Because it was almost like, hey, we want to run between the A and B gap. let's move him this way. And he's kind of trying to, get upfield a little bit. And it's like, oh man, now I opened this up a little bit more for this run game. So I thought I saw that come up a little bit. Someone on my timeline mentioned Dee Ford. What do you think about kind of viewing him through the lens of that kind of prospect? Dee Ford was not a top 20 pick. I believe he was picked in the late 20s. It took a little minute for him to kind of get going at the NFL level and really understand like how he has to win. We saw what he was for the 49ers. We've talked a lot about Eric Armstead and where you get the most benefits from him, and that's him being that 4-3 big end guy. And 49ers did a lot of that in 2019 where he was the big end, and then, all right, Dee Ford, you pin your ears back, you come in, you get after the quarterback, we slide Eric Armstead inside. What do you think about him maybe kind of playing in that kind of role where you aren't having to depend on him to be an edge setter or a run stopper, but more so a guy that just, hey, you're going to be more of a pass rush guy, and we're just going to get you in those situations, and you go get to the quarterback.
Yeah, and you're drafting the traits and hoping he can develop more skills, and it does take pass rushers some time to develop those skills sometimes. And Dee Ford's the comp. It's the one I have written down here. And when you look at it immediately hit me when I saw his combine numbers. Dee Ford was almost exact height, weight, speed. Dee Ford ran a little slower. Dee Ford's a little bit more productive in college as a player, but I think it's a very similar player. I think his style of play will be similar in the NFL. I think he fits schematically the same way. So he does fit the 49ers and what they want to do. And even if he's only rotational at first, that's fine. But again, I think he's got some strength, and he's down to battle and play on early rundowns off the edge too in that wide 9 system. So I like Chop Robinson. I think late round 1 is where he should be. He might go top 25. He might go top 20. Who knows, because of his athleticism. And it'll be eye of the beholder with him. And maybe some teams will care more about his traits than other teams will. But I like him at 31. And if he's there, I think I would rather take someone like Chop Robinson versus, a guy who's maybe not going to stick at tackle in the NFL and play inside at guard instead, that we've been looking a lot at.
And you talked about him against the run. There were times where they lined him up not as a nose tackle, but kind of in that 0.
Yeah.
And I watched him. I actually noted here, can win with immediate quickness in the run game. Mm-hmm. So like you could see him where they're like, okay, we're going to line you up here, and we just want you to kind of be able to knife in there and get in there and maybe kind of blow some things up. Now, again, I saw him win the rep in the sense of the offensive line, but not make a tackle. So I still
I saw a ton of that. He did a lot of winning and not getting any statistical production for his wins, and he can absolutely split the gap and he's explosive off the line. I saw it against Iowa. Iowa was one of his better games as well. Michigan and Iowa, he was creating a lot of problems for guys. So Chop Robinson, I approve. I like him at 31. To be honest with you, I don't think he's going to get there.
I'd say that they are right to mock him in that range.
He's a late round 1 guy for you.
Yeah. So okay. Between 25 and 40.
He's not a guy. Okay, so he's not a guy that like, oh my gosh, I can't believe Chop Robinson's still there at 31.
Correct.
Okay.
Like I think even when like when Drake Jackson was there at pick 61, there were a lot of people kind of surprised a little bit. Oh man, I can't believe Drake Jackson's here at pick 61, 62, whatever it was. If at 31, Chop Robinson's there, I wouldn't be surprised. And I would say, man, like 49ers who are trying to figure it out, they're throwing resources at it, right? Like you see them really trying to, okay, let's trade for Randy Gregory. Let's trade for Chase Young. Like we're trying to figure out, let's trade for Dee Ford, right? Like they traded a second to get Dee Ford and then had to pay him a bunch of money.
Yeah.
So they are really trying to throw all resources at figuring out that they knew they were going to get Nick Bosa and still traded for Dee Ford. Mm-hmm. So they are trying everything possible to have that book in to complement Nick Bosa. But so far, nothing has stuck. Maybe a guy like Chop Robinson will.
Next, we've got Nate Wiggins, cornerback out of Clemson. He's tall, he's skinny, and he is extremely fast, Croc. Let me give you the rundown on his combine measurements before we get into the scouting report, and can't wait for you to critique his technique as a cover corner, Croc. Nate Wiggins out of Clemson, 6'1 and 3/8, 173 pounds at the combine, 4.28 40, just blazing in the 40 time. That was the fastest among defensive backs and cornerbacks at the combine. And you see the speed on tape, Croc. There's a lot of other things I saw on tape, Croc, as well. And there's one element from his combine testing that kind of is baffling. And I do see it on tape a little bit, which is somewhat surprising for a guy who runs 4.28. More on Nate Wiggins. Is he a future 49er? Next. This episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. The offer is good through April 30. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker dealer.
Can I guess what you think is going to be baffling about his combine testing?
But there's actually two things. So go. Yeah.
So one thing, 10-yard split.
10-yard split.
Yeah.
159 10-yard split, Croc, is what dudes that were running 4.65 were putting up in the first 10 yards. Chop Robinson had a 154 10-yard split at 254, which is, I mean, that's absurd. 173 we're talking about for this guy. So Chop Robinson's 10-yard split was 0.05 faster in just 10 yards. And this guy's got that much weight on him. So, and there were times when I questioned his stop-start. Now, I'm not saying he's not twitched up and athletic. He can move. He can fly. He can get up to top speed. But for a guy who's that fast, 4.28, there were times where it was like, okay, little leggy. Little leggy, I think is a good way to put it for a guy who's 6'1", 173.
Well, I'll tell you the other part where you might be right about. Why didn't he do any agility testing?
That's true. That's a great question.
Why no 3-cone? Why no L drill or a short shuttle?
The second slowest 10-yard split of all DBs, including safeties as well, by the way. Fastest
that's a little word
was 10 yard. That's wild.
That's a little worrisome. So for those of you who may not know how that translates to the game, right? A lot of the NFL in general, like you don't see guys just run straight go routes a lot of times. So the faster you are, the easier it is for you to keep up with guys from the line of scrimmage on. The slower your time clock is. You don't feel like I'm in a rush or in a panic. So when guys are trying to burst out and then they sit the routes down, you don't have to be in a panic to try to keep up with them because it's kind of more of an effortless thing for you. Guys that are a little bit slower, like Eric Crocker, once a guy, if he gives me a speed release right now, in my head, I'm thinking, okay, you got to keep up with these guys. So now I got to try really hard, right? As opposed to someone who just has easy speed. So when you think of Wiggins here and maybe being a little bit slower at the start, I think that's where I saw him get beat against UNC down the right sideline, and it didn't look like he had to be in a panic, but then he got beat off the line of scrimmage, and the guy gave him a little chicken wing and created a little bit of separation at the catch point, ended up being a big explosive play. It's just something that you would think that he would be a little bit more explosive. You'd see it kind of jump off the screen a little bit more, and I'm not quite sure I saw it on those kind of plays.
The other surprising thing for a guy who's 6'1" is he had short arms too, 30.5-inch arm length, which kind of negates some of his height when you have that length. And I did see some guys make some catches over him, which is rare for a corner that's that athletic. And even when you have good coverage and you're in a guy's hip and you're 6'1", and there's guys still making plays over you and able to extend a little bit with that little extra push down the field, which I saw a couple times. But my one phrase scouting report, broom handle with wheels. Dude is fast and dude is skinny. He's narrow everywhere. He's narrow in the hips, narrow in the shoulders. I don't even know how much weight he can add to his 173 pounds right now, although I assume he's going to try to get up closer to 180 and probably not run any 40s at his pro day. Tall, big time, long speed, generally a competitive guy, a lot of man coverage, which I like to see. And he's good. He's a good coverage cornerback, Croc. He's a good player. Mixed it up with the big FSU wide receivers. He lined up all over the place against North Carolina. He was shadowing Tez Walker. So wherever Tez went, slot, left side, right side, he was there. There's that highlight hustle play in the North Carolina game too, where he not only saved a touchdown, but he forced a fumble as well, outrunning his teammates down the sideline. So I love the hustle and love the effort there from him. And then he closed out that game versus Tez Walker. He gave up a touchdown, but he also had an interception to close it out in off coverage and jumping a little comeback route at the end of the game on the right sideline. So a lot to like there, but there's some clear negatives, even though he's a good cover corner, good man corner, and is super fast. And it's that skinniness, it's that 10-yard split, it's the shorter arms, it's a little bit of a strider. And while he's got okay quicks, they're kind of average compared to what his 4.28 40 time is. And by the way, he had a good game against Tez Walker, and Clemson did as well, but Tez got him deep and could have had a second touchdown with a slot fade as well. So when you run 4.28, you're getting beat deep. I don't like that, Croc. What'd you see from Nate Wiggins?
I think that he doesn't play as twitched up or as sudden as I ideally would like. And you talked about him being a little bit more long-legged in his movements. I think that was something that you could clearly see. I thought I was going to see someone that was a little bit more explosive in and out of his breaks. And I've talked about before, the guy that I ended up being more impressed with was AJ Terrell's little brother, who was playing on the opposite side wearing number 20. So if you go and you watch Clemson versus UNC, that's something that would kind of jump off the screen where you're like, man, if I just told you guys, hey, go watch Clemson. They have this terrific cornerback that's projected to be a top pick, ran a 4.2, 40 or whatever. Which guy is it? Tell me what you think. You're like, man, number 20. I could just see it jump off the screen and look how quick, and he's feisty and he's fighting with receivers and he's frustrating them and making them punch him. It's like, no, it's the other guy, number 2. And then you go, the one that chased down the guy for the fumble, But from a coverage standpoint, which was consistent, I just would have liked to see him. I want to see certain things jump off a little bit more. I want to see the change of direction a little bit more. Like I want to see the feet. Now there was one play early on where I watched him run with the receiver. He was from off coverage. He opened up, then he flipped his hips and broke up an out route. I thought that was really good. So you could kind of see just the hips and at times being light on his feet. But it wasn't something that was as consistent. Really reminded me of, and this guy is good. He's good in the league. But kind of Jalen Johnson. Like when I remember watching Jalen Johnson at Utah, it was like that where it didn't like pop. But I'm like, man, it does a lot of things good. And I'd say even some of the difference, I felt like Clemson just ran a lot of man, which I want to see, man, because it shows me what you could do. But if I'm comparing him to Jalen Johnson, like Jalen Johnson ran, you could watch 4 plays and watch him do 4 different coverages. It could be quarters, it could be man, it could be cover 3, it could be cover 2. And I don't think you saw quite that schematic versatility from Wiggins to know if he has that in the bag. I'm sure you could teach him those things, but just in the sense of just his movement skills and ability, it looked more like Jalen Johnson to me.
That's why I had so much fun watching that. It's probably the most fun game I've had doing these scouting reports is watching Clemson versus North Carolina, because you got to see a corner play against a future NFL wide receiver with a ton of man coverage against an offense with a future NFL quarterback that was making NFL throws. So that's why this game was so fun to me, and I got a lot from it. And I ended up liking Wiggins. I ended up liking Tez Walker. I ended up liking Drake May, even though it wasn't May's best game. And then North Carolina lost to Clemson in that game.
I thought he missed a lot of throws.
He did
early on.
It was just different than when you see these other games with this, this with the spread and weak arm quarterbacks, and you're like, none of this plays in the NFL. This is stuff that plays in the NFL, and so I got a really clear picture of all those guys. I think.
Have you watched Caleb Williams? I accidentally watched him. I was looking for I wanted to watch that Leggett kid from South Carolina, the receiver, and I clicked on USC, and I'm like, wait, is this South Carolina or like USC? Fight on. And I just clicked on the game, and it ended up being USC versus Colorado. And I watched maybe just a couple drives. I'm like, let me check out Caleb Williams a little bit. And the biggest knock on him is, and I know we're talking about him, we're talking about Nate Wiggins, but the biggest knock on Caleb Williams is, he doesn't get rid of the ball quick enough, doesn't play like within the structure. Sure, it was in that game, especially early on. I mean, the ball was coming out quick, and you could just see the pop off of just the ball popping off his hand, boom, and then just the way he's able to throw. There was some where it was like a screenplay, or it was certain things, and you just see him just drop his arm, just boom, ball out, slant, boom, ball on the receiver. I was like, okay, he is. I watch a lot of USC, of course, but he is good. And if when they're talking about him, obviously they're going to be nitpicking whoever the top prospect is, but he is the best quarterback prospect in this draft.
Yeah, it's crazy because I heard the same thing about Caleb Williams, and you watch him play, and time to throw can be high sometimes because he's extending a play and he makes a big throw and he makes a big play. But when he sees it, he gets the ball out instantly. And I love the word you use, snap. It's like, boom, it's out of his hands and it's right where he wants it to go. He puts the ball how he wants it, where he wants it, when he wants it, and it's out instantly when he sees it. And there's a lot of quick game stuff that he's fine with, but then he tries to go hunting for the big play as well, and he'll roll out and he'll do the Russell Wilson thing at times as well. But as far as getting the ball out on time, no problem with Caleb Williams.
There's throws he can make where, like, I would tell Brock Purdy does what Brock Purdy does well, right? Like, okay, align the feet to the throw and all those type of things. When you're talking about a top prospect, they don't have to do all those things. Sometimes they can get away with it,
right?
Where his feet are this way and he's just able to just throw all upper body, and the ball just still comes out on a line, just boom, accurate. And I'm just like, golly.
Now that I think about it, is the comp for Caleb Williams rich man's Brock Purdy?
Yeah, I mean, rich, but in the sense of a prospect. Like now, Caleb can go to the NFL and not be Brock Purdy. Right. But if you're just talking about ability, it would be Richmond, because he also was like the number one dual threat quarterback coming into college football when he was at Oklahoma. And I don't think I ever thought he would end up being the passer he is now. So that was another thing. So it's kind of hard to compare them, because Brock, while he can move, I don't know if he, dual threat to that extent. Like, you're the best dual threat quarterback in the nation coming out of high school. Brock, clearly, he can move, has athleticism, and you can see it on the college field even a little bit more, because you have those wider hashes, so the game is even a little bit more spread out. But, I can see that. Not a big guy, right? I mean, 6'1", a little bit over 6'1", right? Weighs close to this same. I could see that a little bit. Rich man's Purdy. But just the arm, when you just watch the arm and the ball come out and the throws, that's where, I mean, he threw one ball, he's rolling to his left, and he like leaves his feet, jumps, and like throws this ball, and it's just on the money, just boom. I was like, oh, this is enough. Let me turn this off, and find this other South Carolina field.
He's a dude, and he's going number 1 to the Bears. The Bears aren't going to screw around with that one.
But where's Nate Wiggins going? That's where we're
31. Does he fit the 49ers? Higher, lower? Where do you have him ranked?
Ideally, I would want him in a more press man scheme. 49ers have liked to play a little bit more off coverage. So, I would tend to have somebody that's just a little bit more quick footed, or at least consistently showing that. Now, again, Jalen Johnson went to the Bears. They played some off coverage. I thought he excelled and did a really good job in that, when maybe I would have questioned it a little bit more. Or maybe he'd just be a guy like, I don't really quite like him first round, but if you're telling me second round and you're having them do these things, it can fit. So the tough thing with the 49ers, they're picking 31st, which is like borderline second round. He feels more second round, even though his testing says he should be a top 15 pick. I'm curious to see where he goes. AJ Terrell, I remember watching AJ Terrell, and he was kind of built that way, long-legged, all that. But I just saw a different level of like scrappiness with AJ Terrell. And a lot of people tried to knock him because of his game he had against Jamar Chase. But when you rewatch that game, I mean, he won just as many reps. Unfortunately, when you're a receiver, the reps you win, especially if it's a touchdown, people are gonna notice that more. But when you're evaluating him as a prospect, you just see all these reps he's winning against Jamar Chase.
Who Jamar Chase was later too. When you're
going, we knew who he was on that.
Well, I mean, but he wasn't like in that draft or anything, So you might be watching that game going, okay, this is a good wide receiver, but we didn't realize he's going to be the, number 5 pick in the draft or whatever it was.
Right, because he had missed the next year, dude. Yeah. He sat out or whatever. But yeah, I wouldn't say he's an AJ AJ Terrell as a prospect.
Right.
But if you told me, 49ers traded back, 10 slots and you took him.
You didn't even like him at 31.
Not as much as I think I like Kool-Aid.
So
and we'll talk about Arnold in a bit, but
okay.
Maybe not as much as I like those guys, but I think we're going to see him being mocked high. I think it's going to be more so the 40 times. Now, again, I may watch more games because I'm not done watching them. So I'll watch more games, and then maybe some things are a little bit more consistent. Now, I'll be like, oh, okay, I see it more. And then, all right, we revisit it, and I cut you off at one point. Like, oh, no, hey, real quick, I went back and watched more Nate Wiggins, and maybe he is, perfect for the 49ers at 31.
That's Nate Wiggins. That's Chop Robinson. Are they future 49ers? What do you guys think? Let us know at BD Peacock, at Crocky209, or in the YouTube comments, and let us know what prospects you want to hear from. We got a whole wait list and watch list of guys that we're going to do scouting reports on, and we're stacking our Locked On 49ers big board for April. We'll be here every day for you, including tomorrow with some of the latest, some news out there, some players getting cut. Are they fits for the 49ers? So we got to talk free agency as well. Talk to you then right here, Locked On 49ers.